Hello, my name is Sherry Southard, and I am a professor of legal studies at Clayton State University, where I've been for about 20 years. And my background, of course, is law. This presentation will cover the interconnectedness of copyright law, Creative Commons, and OER, and it'll provide practical and actionable insight on using and sharing OER materials in compliance with the rules that govern them. So let's get started with the description of the three different domains. First, copyright law. The United States Copyright Act is located at Title 17 of the U.S. Code. It grants the creators exclusive right to copy, distribute, and adapt their work. Now, these rights typically endure for the entire lifetime of the author, plus an additional 70 years after the author's death. Now, for educational purposes, copyrighted material can be excluded under what's known as the Fair Use Doctrine in the United States. This allows limited use of copyrighted material without permission from the author. Section 107 of the Code outlines the factors that set the border around these limitations. First, there's the purpose and character of the use. Does the material fall within the areas of teaching, research, criticism, and/or news reporting? Second, there's the nature of the copyrighted work. This is a look at the characteristics and the attributes of the work. Third, there is the amount and substantiality of the portion. Is this a small portion or a large portion of the work that's being included? And fourth, the effect on the use of the potential market of the original work. At the Columbia University's library, if we look at the Copyright Advisory webpage, they have a fair use checklist to assist potential users in evaluating whether the use of a portion of work is permissible under the fair use limitation. If we scroll down here to the bottom, we see a link for the checklist for fair use. And there's over to the left a Creative Commons license, which we'll cover in just a moment. But for now, we see that it's BY. I'll just give you that little preview. BY is the attribution license. This means that the use of the work must be credited to the original creators. So here we see the checklist. First of all, we have the category of purpose and all the factors that can be used in evaluating whether or not this favors use of the fair use exception or whether it does not fall under that exception. Then we move here to nature, amount, and then the effect. So we can see from this checklist that the fair use doctrine limits the amount of work that can be used, and determining whether the use is permissible can be a bit complicated. So that moves us to the solution for this, which is the Creative Commons licensing. The Creative Commons is a nonprofit organization that provides free licenses for creators to make their work available to the public. This licensing framework enables the author to specify conditions under which his or her work can be used. Now, the type of licenses. The first license we have is known as the BY. The BY, as indicated by the icon here, means that you have to give credit to the author, and I'll discuss later in the talk how that credit should be outlined. The second is BY NC, which is non-commercial, and the icon here at the top means this cannot be sold, and of course that attribution is required. The third example is CC BY NC, which is non-commercial, and ND. And the equal sign appears here. This means non-derivative. It must be used in its original form. No changes can be made. The next is BY NC, and this is SA, share alike. And that's where we have this icon here that shows that if there are any changes that are made to the work, for instance, the text of the book might be changed to use a more updated example, then the altered work must be given the identical Creative Commons terms and license. Then we have BY ND, which is non-derivative. And finally, we have BY share alike, which is simply the two requirements of attribution and share alike. Now, the benefit of the Creative Commons is that the licenses, one, increase the access to educational resources, two, they promote sharing of educational resources, and three, they establish clear licensing terms so that the user can comply with the restrictions. Now our third domain is OER. OER is the acronym for Open Educational Resources, which are openly licensed educational materials that can be used for teaching and learning and also for research. Now, OER often utilizes Creative Commons licenses, so that's the connection between the two of those. There are 5 R's of OER. These are the guiding principles that direct the user on how he or she can use the OER content. Now, as to best practices with the use of OER, the first practice is to review and adhere to the licensing terms. So what I've pulled up is one major resource for OER materials, which is OpenStax. If I scroll down to the bottom of this volume that can be used for Calculus 3, I see what the licensing requirements are. This book may be used, but there must be a proper attribution here with the by. It cannot be used for commercial purposes, so there's no money here sign. And then it must be share alike. Then if we look at MIT Open Coursework and look at a resource here, I've just pulled up a lecture notes on the utility of democracy. If I pull up those lecture notes and scroll down to the bottom of the notes, it's typically where you'll locate information about the license. I have information about the terms, and that's what this qualifies as here. If I looked at the first part is the privacy term of use, and then we have the Creative Commons license. Here we have a CC BY, NC, share alike. Now the next best practice is to attribute the work properly. Here I have a resource, news media rights, that has the acronym that we use for ensuring that the work is attributed properly. First of all, you must have the title of the work, and all of this is if it's available. The next thing that you need is the author of the material. Thirdly, you need to include the source of the material, and that's the URL is most prevalent resource that or source that you would cite. And finally, the license itself. What is the license that is provided here? Now I'm going to scroll down here to additional information that's very helpful. If you have a copyright that's included in the original work, then that copyright must be replicated in the attribution. If we scroll down here to the license builder, that's an incredibly helpful resource. So I'm going to double click that, and that takes me to the Creative Commons license builder. So all I need to do is follow these steps and it creates the license for me. So let's look at the example that let's just say we have a license, and then we scroll down on the type, what version. Say this is a license, let's say OS CC BY essay. CC BY essay is our example. So then I go to next, and then it asks the information. So I'm going to make up something and say how to properly cite, and then the name, me, the website, just going to put Google in for that, and I don't have a profile for the creator and the date of creation. Let's indicate that this was in 2020, and then we select done. And here over to the right side we have our attribution, and all you have to do is select copy and put it in your resource. To sum up, the first domain, OER, is the vast number of educational resources that are available to be used freely for educational purposes. We can think of it as a universe full of educational content. Now, the rules of that universe, like the laws of gravity, are copyright law. That's our second domain. And there is a copyright spectrum. There's the least restrictive term, which is public domain, where the material is free for all to use. There are the Creative Commons licenses, our third domain, which range from the least to the most restrictive of those terms. And finally, there are full copyright terms, which is the most restrictive in the spectrum. Now, there is one exception under copyrighted terms, and that is fair use doctrine. And those are works that are used for educational purposes as long as the 4-part test is fulfilled. And fair use doctrine applies to all copywritten material, not just OER. I hope you've enjoyed my presentation.